What is up, Mizzou fans? Welcome back to another episode of the Show Me Football podcast. I'm Josh Fan. He's Brayden Dowers. We're going to talk Mizzou football. They just wrapped up spring practice. Drink had a lot to say. We're going to discuss it right after this. Ladies and gentlemen, Missouri Tigers fans, we are back finally after a long absence. It just kind of feels like Brayden, college football is in the air right now. I don't know. Today just felt like a good day to talk about the Missouri Tigers. They just wrapped up spring practice. Some of the position groups are starting to shake out a little bit. There's some transfer portal stuff to talk about. We figured that we would just check in with you guys. But Brayden, first of all, before we get into anything else, how are you doing today?
Not too bad. It's been a pretty chill Saturday, just waiting for the Royals game to start. Chugging along in school, and ready to talk about the Missouri Tigers as we are May, June, July, August, about 4 months away from Missouri Tigers taking the field at Faurot Field.
Yeah, this offseason went by very quickly. It's kind of crazy because it's like once spring practice wraps up, you can kind of feel the season getting close. But guys, I have all the quotes compiled from Gerard Hamilton of PowerMizzou.com. Now, these are all things that Drinkwitz said, but I'm going to credit him just because he had them all in one place. I'm going to be reading from what he put on PowerMizzou.com as far as what Drinkwitz had to say to wrap up spring practice. So Drink started by saying at the beginning of spring, Brayden, that he thinks this is his most talented team ever. Now, that could just be coach speak, but honestly, it kind of checks out with what we all kind of thought following the winter portal. I think everyone agrees like Mizzou really killed the transfer portal. Getting Damon Wilson at the tail end of things, the transfer from Georgia, really was the cherry on top of a great portal class. They also got the quarterback situation figured out, or at least got it down to a couple guys that they really like. But Brayden, I'll start with asking you: what do you think this is Drink's most talented team he's ever had? Do you think that's just coach speak, or would you agree with him in that aspect?
I think that we'll obviously know whenever the season's over whether it's the most talented or not. But coming into the season, I I'm a little bit less excited for this team than I was for last year, even though we did have a good year last year, but I've tempered my expectations from where the expectations were from last year. And we don't have a lot of the same returning guys, so there's a lot more question marks on the team. And it is definitely coach talk because Drink isn't going to come out and say, yeah, this team's not as good as it was last year or 2023, which was when he really turned the corner with this program. But I do think it does have the ability to be the most talented. I think that Bo Pribula's ceiling is a lot higher than any ceiling that Brady Cook could have ever come to. Kevin Coleman is a really good addition that can supplement the loss of Theo Weiss and Luther Burden. And we're going to need a lot of guys to supplement the loss there because we lost a lot of talent there in the wide receiver room. Damon Wilson is explosive off the edge and has the ability to be a welcome addition to this pass rush. I know that we just lost Ja'Kai Lang, which we'll get into later. Who knows what the situation is with Eddie Kelly. And we got a few transfers on the offensive line too. So there's a few moving parts. I really like the transfer from UNLV. That would be
Jalen Catalon.
Jalen Catalon. I always forget his name, but I remember watching his game against Boise State where he basically single-handedly stopped Ashton Genty in both of their matchups. He had 5 interceptions on the year, if I remember right. Just a really good ball player that can really add some safety depth to this team, which is something that I think that Corey Batoon's squad struggled with last year.
Yeah.
So I think our secondary has the ability to be a lot more talented. I think our linebackers are in about the same spot. I think our defensive line with Damon Wilson, sorry, has the ability to elevate the defensive line play. The offensive line, I think, would be about the same. Wide receiver room probably takes a step back. And I forgot to mention Ahmad Hardy. I think Ahmad Hardy and a lot of Missouri Tiger fans are really excited about him and his potential. I
Yeah.
think that he has the ability to really elevate this running back room. And then Pribula, as I said, I think has a higher ceiling than Brady Cook, but could also have a lower floor because with Brady Cook, you kind of knew what you were going to get.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's about my take on the entire roster and what the transfer portal has been for the Tigers.
I think, you said it pretty well, mentioning that it's just a lot of moving parts, but I think we can all see how good they can be if everyone reaches their ceiling at all these
Yeah.
positions where they added a lot of high upside players. Um, I'll start with the defense because Drinkwitz did come out and pretty much say after spring practice that he feels the defense is ahead of the offense, which makes sense because, I mean,
Yeah.
that's where they have the most talent, I feel like. That's also where they were really good last year. That was their strong side of the ball last year for the most part. Had a few games here and there where things definitely could have gone better, but I think the defense was still ultimately their strength last year.
Yeah.
But they went ahead and they added a bunch to their pass rush. Obviously, they just lost Ja'Kai Lang to the transfer portal, which is unfortunate because I feel like he was a good player in limited snaps. But this is just the reality when you're that deep at that position. You're going to lose a guy that you like because you have so many players that are going to earn snaps in this defense. You have Damon Wilson, but they also are getting Darius Smith back healthy this year, who's an athletic freak. They're also returning Zion Young, who started last year. They still have Javion Hilson, the 5-star freshman, Nate Johnson, who was a freshman All-American at App State 2 years ago. I heard some rumors that he may be the fastest player on defense, which is pretty crazy for a defensive end. But, I mean, just talent all over the board. Defensive tackle, same thing. Chris McClellan. They also return a lot there. Elias Williams is upcoming, the underclassmen, just so many guys. And then linebacker, Drinkwitz said that Nick Rodriguez had the best spring of any defensive player, which is really good to hear. Freshman linebacker last year got some playing time here and there. And then we got the news, Brayden, that Mekhi Bear, the linebacker that they added during the winter portal window, is transferring back out again. Now, typically, this is something that people would look at and say, oh, this is what's wrong with college football. How are you going to have a player that just transferred in during the winter and now he's already leaving? This is so stupid. But I don't really blame him in this case because there was a material change in which the JUCO ruling that was pretty much sparked by Diego Pavia and his lawsuit made it to where Tristan Newsom was allowed to return for one more year. He started for this defense last year. You obviously are probably going to take him over Mekhi Bear, who I think was a good piece. But when you include the fact that younger guys are coming up at linebacker like Nick Rodriguez, like Jeremiah Beasley, you're also getting Khalil Jacobs back, who got hurt last year. And that's not even mentioning Josiah Trotter, who is probably one of the biggest additions that they made in the portal. He's a guy that is probably going to end up being a really good player, potentially an NFL prospect in coming years. And then in the secondary, Brayden, you kind of touched on it already with the secondary. Safety was a little bit of a weakness last year because of the fact that these safeties just could not keep their eyes out of the backfield and allowed a lot of big plays because of it. Marvin Burks was someone that gave up a lot of big plays. And I still like Marvin Burks, and I still think he can be a good player, but it was clear that they needed more. They went out and they got a lot more. They added Most Phillips from Virginia Tech, Santana Banner from Northern Illinois, who was a big part in why they upset Notre Dame. And then Jalen Catalon was just like another cherry on top there. Just a guy that's like, hey, we're going to hang our nuts a little bit in the transfer portal and go and get a guy who's like an All-American.
Yeah.
And he's probably going to start at free safety. Drinkwitz mentioned him specifically after spring practice, that he would hate to be a wide receiver going over the middle with Jalen Catalon in the defensive backfield. So basically, Brayden, to put a bow on it for the defense, Drinkwitz really likes what he has. They added a lot there on top of the fact that they were already pretty good last year. I think last year, with it being Corey Batum's first year, he tried to kind of keep it the way Blake Baker had it to smooth the transition. But I think this year he has added guys that make it easier to run what he wants to run, which is a defense that does not really blitz a lot, gets after it with their front four. But I think their front four is going to be a lot more capable this year, and they have a lot more speed rushers from the edge, which is going to make it better to get quick pressure on the quarterback. And then he's going to drop his guys back in coverage And better yet, this time around, Brayden, is I think the guys that they are going to have in coverage are going to be even better than what they had last year, which is just going to make for an even better defense in 2025, I think.
Yeah, I think one guy that we both forgot to mention was Stephen Hall, the transfer from
Yeah.
Washington State. Right now, he's listed higher than Toriano Pride, who is one of our starting corners from last year's. Hall's listed over him on the depth chart. And Hall adds another level of depth to this cornerback room. And while Marvin Burks is still listed as a starter, he was my breakout player for last year on the defensive side because I was really impressed by his freshman season, and he just took a little bit of a step back. Now I think in Corey Batoon's second year, first full season with these guys because of how late Blake Baker left last year.
Yeah.
I think that Burks is going to be able to fill in, and he will have a consistent routine with this team, and he's going into the season knowing what he has in Corey Batoon's defense. And I'm still high on his upside and his potential and his ability. So I'm excited for him at strong safety at strong safety, because Cantalon's probably going to sit in as that free safety, sit over the middle of the field, just absolutely light up wide receivers. And then with our corners, Drayden Norwood, solid returning starter from last year. And then Stephen Hall, Toriano Pride, whatever we want to do there. And then Dalen Carnile has been reliable for Mizzou and the nickel for the last few years.
Yep.
So having him basically based off the depth chart, we're only having 4 new starters and 7 returning starters on defense, which is a really good sign. And like you mentioned with that defensive line, our only real big loss that started and played a lot of games last year was Johnny Walker. And
And I think Damon
we don't
Wilson's
even,
a 1-for-1 replacement there.
yeah, I think that Damon Wilson is a 1-for-1, if not a little bit better replacement there.
Yeah.
And I think that Zion Young's only going to be getting better. Chris McClellan was a dog last year. I absolutely loved watching him every single game day at Faroe. Sterling Webb, solid. Maybe the interior of the defensive line is a little bit weaker without Christian Williams. That feels
that's
like
one of the question marks, you could say.
Yeah. Having Sterling Webb listed as our starting defensive tackle is a little questionable, but I still like him. And then getting Darius Smith back, we expected that to be kind of our Darius Robinson replacement last year. Having him come in with with Darius Smith and a Zion Young, having those guys fill in for Darius Smith, for Darius Robinson.
So many Dariuses and Darius.
I know there's so many DR names, and it's like I can't keep track of all of them. But no, I think that Darius Smith, I think that his upside and his ability coming off of that ACL injury in spring of last year, I'm really excited for what he can bring to the table. I'm really glad that he didn't transfer out and that the coaching staff still believes in him and his ability, because him with Damian Wilson, I think, has the possibility of being a really, really, really deadly duo on the outside of our defensive line. And then you mentioned Curtis Jacobs. I really liked what I saw from him last year, getting Tristan Newsom back. With the JUCO portal ruling, very excited to see what this defense can do.
There's just so much depth, and I think so if you want to point out a weak spot from last year, I think the secondary was not necessarily weak, but they had their lows were pretty low, right? Like they had some games where it just felt like, they couldn't.
There was a lot of busted plays.
Yeah, a lot of busted coverages. But I think, when you look at that position group with Toriano Pride, Drayden Norwood, Nick DeLoach, who I forgot to mention earlier, those were with the exception of Drayden Norwood, he played a lot before last year. Yeah. But that was the first real year of playing time for guys like Nick DeLoach and Toriano Pride. I think they're going to get better this year. I think those guys are only going to continue to develop. But the important thing is that Mizzou is not necessarily banking on the development of those guys, and they're not banking on the development of Marvin Burks and some of the younger players, because they brought in Santana Banner and Stephen Hall and Jalen Catalon. Like you're adding on top of what you already have. You're not getting too comfortable.
You're giving yourself a safety net.
and yeah, and it just gives you even better depth. And I think this defense has a lot of depth. Drink's comments check out. I think saying that the defense is ahead of the offense, that's expected because the offense still has a lot of question marks, a lot of new guys. But I think this team, worst case scenario, Brayden is going to win a lot of games because they have a really good defense and an offense that can really run the ball, and they're going
Yeah.
to eat up clock, and they're going to be a ball control offense. I think that's worst case scenario for this team. How many games will that win them? Well, we'll see. And of course, the biggest question mark on offense, and I think, unless Brayden, you had anything else to add about the defense, it's a good transition to the offense because, we had that quarterback competition going on right now between Sam Horn and Bo Pribula. Drink says it's not close to being done, but I think that really is coach speak if you want to talk about coach speak.
Yeah.
I don't think you bring in Bo Pribula and pay him all that money that is being reported unless you plan on him being your starter next year. And I like Sam
100%.
Horn, and the fact that Sam Horn is going to be pushing Bo Pribula, and the fact that you have him as an option this year, I still like that. I feel like a lot of people have written Sam Horn off completely. I don't think he's going to win the starting job, but it's still a nice guy to have in your quarterback room, and someone that if Bo Pribula maybe got hurt or ended up not working out, I'm excited to see what Sam Horn has. And then you also have Matt Zollers, who Drink talked about highly in spring practice. That's a good quarterback room. This is a quarterback room with a lot of upside. And
Yeah.
I think, Bo Pribula is going to be their starting quarterback. And the question is, can he throw? Well, Drinkwitz has already said that he's further ahead than they thought he would be as a thrower. That's good to hear. Again, you could debate that being coach speak, but I mean, it's nice to hear that. And then Kirby Moore also added a more detailed comment basically saying that he's taking care of the football in practice. They're impressed with the way that he's not, turning the ball over in practice in these scrimmages. I think that's a really good thing because usually in practice is when you see these guys like taking a lot of risky throws and maybe turning the ball over. Like I kind of think of like when Patrick Mahomes was a rookie and there was articles that came out that he threw like 7 interceptions in practice and everyone thought he was going to suck. Obviously not saying Bo Pribula is going to be Patrick Mahomes, but it seems like he's already further ahead in the aspect that he's not turning the football over. And like I said, if Mizzou can have, at the worst, a ball control offense that protects the football, can, just destroy teams on the ground and have a good defense, I think they can win a lot of games just off the back of that.
That would be the ideal scenario, is having a top 20 defense in the country and then having a offense that is also top 20 in time of possession, because that'll bode well and that'll get you a lot of wins. I think that this offense, like you said, is going to be ran through Ahmad Hardy, and we're going to see a lot of RPOs with Bo Pribula and Ahmad Hardy, where if Pribula doesn't like what the running lanes are for Hardy, he can just draw the football back and then rip it on a slant. Or he can take it himself because Pribula definitely has that running ability. And if he's smart with the football, you can do that. You can run a bunch of RPOs with him. I said it in multiple podcasts before, but he won them that Wisconsin game for Penn State. He came in for Aller, who was hurt, didn't look the greatest, and he just went like 95 yards down the field and scored. And if that's the Bo Pribula that we get, or a little bit better, I think that Mizzou has the ability to make the playoffs this year. And I don't want to get ahead of myself, but that is the ceiling for this team. That is the ceiling for Bo Pribula, is getting to the playoffs and maybe even winning a playoff game, because the way that this team is built, and if they execute on what their game plan is going to be week in and week out, I think that they can do it, because Bo Pribula and Ahmad Hardy, I think, have the upside and the potential to really elevate this offense to a level that we haven't seen before. And again, we may not have the wide receivers that we did last year, but we have enough, especially with how much of a boost that this running game could have. Though with all of this, I think the floor is potentially lower, because there's a chance that Bo Pribula comes in and has worse accuracy than Brady Cook, is turning the ball over left and right. And
Yeah.
because of that, Ahmad Hardy can't get the ground game going, because defenses are just going to stack 8 in the box and trust their defense to go one-on-one. So it's a lot of give and take. It's a lot of, is Pribula going to be able to execute is he going to be able to be accurate? And if not, does Sam Horn get a look? I don't really think so. I'm kind of now in the camp of Sam. Like I'm done on the Sam Horn train. We've seen like 2 drives from him in 4 years at the school. So like I don't really know why we're still holding on to the Sam Horn's going to be great. We haven't seen him. Like he's gotten hurt from baseball. He's gotten hurt from other things, and he's been on the bench behind Brady Cook. So I don't really see the reason in being all in on the Sam Horn upside. I think that he can be a fine, serviceable backup with Drew Pine
Yeah.
entering the portal here pretty recently. But I'm not really going to care too much or really think that Sam Horn's the future of this team, especially when a guy like Matt Zollers is sitting right there as well.
Yeah, no, for sure. I agree with everything. Going back to like the running game and Pribula and all that, I think, specifically with RPOs, that was something that I think people thought we could run, and Kirby Moore thought we could run with Brady Cook,
Yeah.
but Brady Cook wasn't like a true running threat. He could run when he needed to, when the play broke down, and he had sufficient athleticism in order to do that, but he wasn't a running quarterback. Pribula
No.
is actually a running quarterback. I said this when they acquired him from the portal.
Like
He's an
they can
actual.
actually have designed runs with him.
Yes, you
You
can
couldn't
actually.
do that with Cook.
No, I mean this is someone that you can actually. The RPOs are going to be more dangerous because you actually have to take seriously the threat that he can take off and run. And I think there's just a little bit of gamer to him that you really want in a quarterback. Just that like he comes in a big spot, just like he did in that Wisconsin game, and he just doesn't even look nervous at all, not phased. Even in that game, looking at his highlights, I thought, going through his progressions, he looked really good. He wasn't rushed. He looked rather poised in the pocket. We'll have to see how accurate he really is, like you said, and if that deep ball is truly there. But when you look at the weapons that they've surrounded him with, I think, you said this is going to be a step back from Luther Burden and Theo Weiss, but when you really break it down, Kevin Coleman, who they added, I don't think it's necessarily crazy to say that he could be a 1-for-1 replacement for Luther in the slot, just pure production wise, because I mean, Kevin Coleman was all SEC last year, had more yards than Luther Burden, was nearly 1,000-yard receiver. Now, different situations. I think we can all agree that step back in quarterback play is why Luther's stats were down. I get it, but Kevin Coleman's going to be really good. And that's a guy, too, when you talk about bringing Pribula along, you can run some plays, little gimmick stuff here and there, gadget stuff with Kevin Coleman to ease Pribula along before you really start to open up the offense by throwing downfield. And then I think Josh Manning, this is a guy that could potentially replace Theo Weiss on the outside. It could maybe even be a seamless transition just based off what we saw from him last year. And then that's not even mentioning Marquise Johnson, who I think, Brayden, there haven't really been many people higher on Marquise Johnson than you and I. I think he's going to be a star next year. I thought he really got buried in the offense last year again due to poor quarterback play, but there were times where he was open last year, especially early on, and Brady Cook just missed him straight up. And if Bo Pribula can hit on some of those throws and utilize some of the speed that we have, even, in the screen game. I know you hate screens, but it's just a part of the Drink Kirby offense, right? But I think it's important that they still have that in the playbook, especially as Bo Pribula is brought along in some of these games. You're not always going to be chucking it downfield. That's not what this offense is going to be about. And Drinkwitz's offense have always leaned on having a strong running game. But luckily, I think Ahmad Hardy might be the best running back that Drinkwitz has ever worked with. And he's worked with a lot of good running backs, but I think Ahmad Hardy is going to be very good. You still have Jamal Roberts there, who Drinkwitz called Mr. Dependable in spring. And then, of course, the freshman Marquise Davis, who they flipped from Kentucky on signing day, I believe it was. I think he's going to figure into the mix a little bit as a freshman, too.
Yeah, I 100% agree with everything that you said on Marquise Johnson. Because if Pribula can just hit a few of those deep throws that Brady Cook, for whatever reason, just completely forgot how to hit last year, this offense is good. Like, this offense has another layer to it because we didn't have a deep ball passing game this year. And
yeah,
I don't like screens with Brady Cook And that's because he had absolutely no zip on the ball. If you want to run a screen, you have to get the ball out quick. And Brady Cook was slow in his decision making process, and he doesn't throw the ball that fast. Bo Pribula, on the other hand, from what I've seen, has a lot more zip on his ball than Brady Cook ever did. And
Yeah.
you can actually effectively run screens if that's what you're doing. You're going to be able to get the ball out to the outside quick, have your wide receivers block, and then run it upfield. And we have the wide receivers to do that still, like you said, with Josh Manning. I don't know if he really replicates what Theo Weiss did last year, because what Theo Weiss did last year was pretty special. And that's going to be hard for Manning's a sophomore, I believe. Pretty sure Manning's a sophomore
I think
or a redshirt sophomore.
he
Yeah.
burned his red shirt as a freshman, didn't he?
I don't remember.
I don't remember off the top of my head either, but sophomore, junior, whatever.
Yeah.
You get the point.
Manning, I don't know if he's going to be able to replicate what Theo Weiss did last year, but I do think that he'll be able to supplement some of it, but I don't think he's going to be as good as Theo was.
Yeah, no, and that's fair. I mean, maybe not necessarily next year, but I definitely think he's, next in line behind Theo as that outside wide receiver. And that's not even mentioning James Madison. I think he'll definitely improve this year. He'll get some playing time. Drinkwitz said that Donovan Oligbode impressed along with the other freshmen and that he'll push for time. They may add another wide receiver, just one more, in the portal in the spring, just because they lost Courtney Crutchfield there in the winter transfer portal. I think they maybe want to bring in a guy that has upside. That's not necessarily going to steal snaps from the guys they have, but just another guy in that room. Tight end, I think, if you can get a healthy Brett Norfleet this year, that's obviously going to improve things. Jordan Harris with another year of development. I think, there's potential there with him as a pass catcher.
His size is just insane.
Yeah. I mean, obviously the hands have to come, but I think what a lot of people forget with him is that I don't think he started playing football till like his senior year of high school. He's very new to the sport. But I think the raw ability is there for him. And at worst, he's a really big, good blocking tight end. And I think that brings us next to the offensive line, which I think is the biggest question mark outside of quarterback, because you lost Armand Membo, probably going to be a top 5 pick, maybe even in the draft here in a couple of weeks. You lost your starting left tackle last year and Marcus Bryant. Connor Tollison's going to be coming off a torn ACL. There's definitely some spots that we're going to have to see some guys emerge. And left tackle, Drinkwitz said it's mostly been Javen Richardson at left tackle, who's the JUCO guy that they added a couple years ago. That scares me just a little bit. I feel like if Javen Richardson is your best option at left tackle thus far, I'm a little bit worried. I think maybe that's a position they'll try to coerce somebody into the portal during the spring window. We'll see. But Drinkwitz did say that Keegan Trost, who transferred in from Wake Forest, I believe it was, has pretty much solidified himself as the starting right tackle already. That's good to hear when you're like, yeah, this guy's outright won the job during the spring. I think that's pretty positive. And then sounds like Dominic Gadis, who transferred in from Michigan, has been the center while Connor Tollison has been recovering. That's good to hear. And then sounds like Tristan Wilson is really pushing to be that starting right guard. And then Caden Green at left guard, who I think was a much better player than what he got credit for, especially down the stretch of last year.
Yeah. I think that Logan Reichart still has a little bit of upside.
Yeah.
Between him and Wilson there at right guard.
Yep.
I like right guard and left tackle are probably the two most concerning spots. Obviously, Derek Geis and Tollison Goodies. Depending on Tollison's availability and if he's able to come off the ACL injury, which I think he'll be all right. If Tollison's back to normal whenever he gets back from that injury, he'll be fine and will be fine at the center position. Like you mentioned with left tackle, I don't really like either of the names there. So hopefully we do find somebody in the portal at left tackle. Left guard, I'm completely fine with Caden Green, and I think that he'll be fine with another year development. I think that the narrative surrounding him were just solely created by hating Oklahoma fans that were trying to just shit talk on him.
Well, and like,
nonstop.
granted, he did struggle at times last year, but like that
Yeah,
was expected with a guy who was, only started 7
a
games at
true
Oklahoma as a true
sophomore.
freshman. Yeah, true
Yeah,
sophomore. Like there was gonna be an adjustment period, but he definitely was very good down the stretch of the season. Was particularly good in the bowl game. So I think the main concern, I think they can scrap together play at right guard. The main concern is
is tackle.
left tackle. And I think if we get to fall camp and all of a sudden they announce, oh, Caden Green's moving to left guard, I think that's when you can maybe start to panic a little bit. It's like, oh, they ran out of options here. They're going to try Caden Green there, which, maybe isn't necessarily the worst option because he did
Yeah,
start there at Oklahoma during those last 7 games of their season. I think he has the size. He can play that position. And I think it's almost similar to what the
but if you're a team that has playoff aspirations, Caden Green can't be your starting left tackle.
No, I agree with that. It almost kind of reminds me of what the Chiefs did with Joe Tooney, where it's like he's very good at left guard. It's probably better than what you have at left tackle, and then you can scrap together a left guard play. But if you're really trying to get somewhere this season, you don't want that to be your
No,
situation at left tackle.
100%. And then Keegan Trost, I don't really know too much about him and what he did at Wake Forest, but if Drink says that he's basically solidified himself as a starting right tackle, and I remember you liked him coming out of the portal, then
Yeah,
I'll take Drinks and your word for it that I mean, it's obviously not going to be as good as Membu,
no,
who is going to be a top 10 pick by the looks of things. But I mean, we can still get above average to great play out of Trost, I think, based off of what I've
yeah.
heard.
Yeah, no, I think as long as he provides replacement level play comparatively to Membo as a run blocker and a pass blocker, I think you're going to be just fine there. And I think Bo Pribula and Ahmad Hardy are guys that are going to be able to make do with a slightly worse right tackle if that comes down to it.
Yeah.
So I think really, I mean, that's most of the talk coming out of spring, Brayden. I do agree with Drinkwitz. I do think on paper, this is the most talented team that they've ever had. Um, some things have to work out. Some of their portal additions have to hit. But if that happens, if the majority of those hit, and you see some of these younger guys develop, because I think this year, Brayden, compared to last year, is going to be a year where we're kind of hoping that some of the young guys emerge, that the ceiling's higher. Because last year the expectation was that they're a playoff team, right? They fell short of those
Yeah.
expectations. It was disappointing, but we thought with everything that they were bringing back, like, hey, man, this team's going to make a playoff run. This year, it's more like we're not returning as much. There's a lot more question marks, but we believe the ceiling is higher. And if everything hits, they can be a playoff team.
Yeah. 100%. I think that, I mean, we've kind of said it multiple times already, but the ceiling of this team is a playoff team that can maybe get a win or two. No reason in having national championship aspirations with them, but the ceiling's there. They have the potential. They have the schedule that is very favorable, I think.
Yes.
Pretty weak non-conference schedule. I will say, and I think me and you are on the same page here. We could go 11-1, but I want Drink fired if that one losses to Kansas.
Yep. I agree with you there. I think that would be a national embarrassment. You cannot lose to them.
No.
Um,
Yeah.
but
We
yeah,
could
no,
beat Bama. We could beat
no.
A&M. We could beat Oklahoma again. I don't care.
Yeah, no. If he loses to Kansas, we will jump on here saying he should be fired.
Yeah.
That's how it's going to go. I will say though, before we wrap this up and talk about one of the national stories, Drinkwitz anticipates 8 portal entries for the spring. He didn't really sound too concerned about it, so I don't think it's going to be like any huge names really. We've already seen 4 of them, I believe it is, off the top of my head: Drew Pine, Jakai Lang, Jamarion Wayne, and then Makai Bayer. So there's 4 right there. I may be forgetting one, but I think it's going to be more so like the Drew Pine type of transfers, guys that after spring ball realize, hey, I'm not going to be very high on the depth chart. I'm not going to be where I want to be playing time wise. And that's what you're going to see. If there's any surprises, Drinkwitz said, we'll go out in the portal and we'll find someone else that's just as good, if not better. They do have that ability. Now, Brayden, before we wrap up this episode, I want to talk about what's the biggest story in college football right now, which is Nico Iamaleava leaving the Tennessee Volunteers after he failed to show up to practice and team meetings, supposedly was demanding double the amount of NIL that he was already getting. He was rumored to already be getting at least $2 million from Tennessee to be their starting quarterback. Him and his dad, who's essentially his agent, his reps, came out and said, "Hey, we want $4 million." And Tennessee did not flinch. They said, "Yeah, no, we're not doing that. We're not getting bent over the barrel for one guy. Either you want to be a volunteer or you don't." Nico said, "All right." And now he's hitting the portal. This is pretty massive because, for one, it sets a really interesting precedent of, who else could potentially try and do this. But I think it's going to be interesting to see what actually happens because could Nico go out, get absolutely paid, get what he wants, what Tennessee wasn't willing to give him? Sure. But there's also a scenario where he goes into the portal, ends up not really getting what he wants, goes somewhere else, and kind of fades into irrelevancy. And what exactly happens, I think, is going to determine how often we see this type of situation unfold going forward. And I think this just once again emphasizes what everyone was already saying. This NIL stuff, this portal stuff is absolutely bonkers. We have to put guardrails in place at some point. But Brayden, what are your thoughts on Tennessee basically losing their starting quarterback? This is the situation that no one wants. Before I let you speak, I'll say I think if you're a college football fan, this is your absolute worst nightmare. Is you go through spring practice, think you have your team that you really like, and then all of a sudden your starting quarterback enters the transfer portal. That is the absolute worst case scenario to not even have any clue who your starting quarterback is after spring.
Yeah. Like if this happened with Bo Pribula, we'd be freaking the fuck out because it's just not good, and it's not good for the sport. This is a kind of move that makes Tennessee fans just kind of like lose, like it'll make people lose interest in the season. It'll make people lose interest in the sport as a whole.
It's the type of thing where people will be like, "I'm done with college football." Now,
yeah,
ultimately,
it's just like, come
they're
on
not
now.
really done with college football. Like we're all still going to be fans, but it is just absolutely ridiculous.
It's a headache.
Yeah.
It's a headache. And I understand the point and the narratives that, well, Josh Heupel's gone from UCF to Tennessee and he came from Mizzou. He was at Oklahoma. That's just the nature of coaching and how coaching's always going to be. And Josh Heupel also hasn't been in, he'll stay at those places for 3 or 4 years. Like he's been at Tennessee now for 4 or 5 seasons. And had an entire portal come through, or an entire class come through. And the entire argument and narrative, like coaches can just up and leave whenever, is a valid argument for some cases.
I think it used to be
ridiculous.
Here's the thing. I think that used to be about, and it still somewhat is. It's still kind of shitty to have like a signing class and then leave after your class is already signed.
Yeah.
But with the way that the portal is now and everything, these kids can still get released from their NLI and go to a different school. Like they're not held hostage anymore. You don't have to sit out. You can transfer with no penalty. Yeah. So the coach leaving really doesn't matter anymore. Besides, being an inconvenience, the kids have to go find a new landing spot. But I mean, it's not like Josh Heupel is all of a sudden saying, 4 months before the season, double my pay or I leave. That's what Nico Iamaleava just did.
And that shouldn't be the case for college sports. And this might sound like a just absolute boomer take, but they're called student athletes for a reason. A lot of these guys aren't even going to play in the NFL. And I get wanting to cash in on your name, image, and likeness in college, but at some point they have to value education over this. And the fact that, we were talking about it earlier, but the fact that Nico literally isn't allowed to go to any SEC school shows that the prioritization is on the sport and not the students and these kids being able to get any form of education, because they're not using these colleges for the education. And I 100% get it, but we have to at least pretend like we care about academics to at least some extent. And the transfer portal has just kind of completely ruined that. And kids going to 5 different schools in 4 years. It's like, what are we doing? Um,
Yeah.
just like I don't even really have any suggestions for how you implement guardrails on it. And I think
I think it's
that
really
what you said,
tough. I just sorry to cut you off. I just think it's really tough because if you implement guardrails, then we're just going to go back to the way it was, which is teams cheating under the table.
yeah. And I think that NIL has definitely created a lot of parity in college football. I mean, the fact that Indiana and SMU got to the playoffs last year
Mm-hmm.
is incredible. But I think what you said about Nico just kind of fading into irrelevance is very likely because he's at a national brand like Tennessee, and a stat that everybody loves to point to is that he only threw I think it was 6 or 7 touchdowns in SEC play, and 4 of them were against Vandy. So it's not like
He's not that good. Like,
he's not that good, and it's a dangerous precedent to set for him to just be like, fuck off Tennessee, I'm going to go get $4 million to play somewhere, and then he's probably not going to be able to get that, I don't think, and then he'll kind of just fade into being an average starter for the next 3 seasons, and then he'll be out of college, and who knows.
yeah, no, it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out because it's going to go a long way, in determining like how exactly this stuff is dealt with in the future. And could there be a desperate team out there that still hasn't found their quarterback that decides to pay him 4 million? Maybe, but again, there could also be a situation where no one else is willing to pay him more than Tennessee did. They're going to say,
Yeah.
"Hey, kind of looks like you padded your stats in the non-conference and then didn't do anything against the SEC. So why do you feel like you're worth double that?" So I don't know. We'll see what happens.
Like I said, it's
Definitely,
kind of just a headache.
yeah.
It's just a headache to the sport, and it's a headache for people to figure out what we need to do. But it's very clear that this isn't the way that it should be done, and I don't really have any solutions. But I mean, there has to be something done to this.
Yeah, no, I agree, but we'll see what happens. NCAA hasn't really proven to be helpful in these matters at all. So even Drinkwitz actually said, he doesn't know what's going on. Like the rules are changing every day. They have to find ways to adapt and survive, and that's just kind of how it is right now. But that's all we got for this episode, guys. So we're going to go ahead and wrap it up there. We'll be back pretty soon with some more in case there's any more transfer portal news or anything like that. We'll maybe hop on, do a quick video talking about that. But for now, it's going to be pretty low key until we get to fall camp. So that's all we got for this one. One more time. If you're watching this, make sure you like, share, and subscribe so more Mizzou fans can find this. You can check out more of my work on showmefootball.com. And then, Brayden, anything that you'd like to plug? Any movie recommendations, actually? I forgot we were doing that. We started that after the bowl game, but what are your latest movie recommendations right now?
I haven't seen it yet because it comes out next week, but get in theaters to go see Sinners. That looks absolutely incredible. The reviews for it are fantastic. What I did just see, however, was Warfare. That is a very, very, very tense 90-minute wartime movie during the Iraq War. Very good movie. I heard that Drop and The Amateur also just came out. 4 very original movies coming out in the next 2 over the last weekend and next week. So get in theaters and see those. I'm really excited to see all 4 of them whenever I have the time to.
So actually, I have one more thing, and then we'll sign off. But there's a controversy in the theater industry right now about the way people are behaving at the Minecraft movie. Are you in favor of teenagers and people associated with meme culture packing out the theaters but making an absolute mess and being degenerates over the Minecraft movie because it gets people in the theater? Or are you like, yeah, this is the absolute worst type of people at the theater, this needs to stop?
I think that the Minecraft movie is kind of transformed into a movie event, and that's a good thing for movies. It's a good thing that this movie is just absolutely crushing it for Warner Brothers because it's going to allow theaters to, it's just going to give theaters more money, and that's what they need. That's what they always need.
Yeah.
And they need hits like this. But at the same and it's perfectly fine to go into a theater and for like a movie event and be hooting and hollering and celebrating and going crazy if that's the vibe of the theater. Whenever I saw the Minecraft movie, that wasn't really the vibe. It was just everybody sat down, watched the movie, laughed at a few of the memes, and that was that. And if people stand up and start cheering, that's great. That's fine. That's perfect. That makes it a very fun, enjoyable time for everybody. But throwing shit around, spilling soda on the floor, like at that point, you're just trashing the theater, making it unusable. And then theaters are losing money on stuff like that. And that gets to a point where it's bad. And you're forcing a bunch of workers to have to come in and just clean up a absolutely disgusting, ridiculous mess, which isn't all right.
Yeah, I think, you have to get people out to the theaters. It's kind of a shame that most of the movies that we see making money and like attracting crowds like this are just like absolute slop movies, like the Minecraft movie is.
I wouldn't call the Minecraft movie slop.
It's
Not
a
to give a
slop.
full review here, but I genuinely enjoyed it because I grew up on Minecraft, but I
Yeah,
genuinely had a fine time with
I mean, I get it. Like it's fun for a lot of people, but you wouldn't call it a cinematic masterpiece by
it. Oh
any
God,
means.
no.
I mean, it's just Jack Blacking it up, over
Mhm.
with a Minecraft theme put over it. But anyway, this could be more something for Show Me Movies. So we'll go ahead and wrap it up there. I'll actually link Show Me Movies in the description as always. But that's all we got for this one, guys. So make sure you like, share, and subscribe so more Mizzou fans can find this. We're signing off. Brayden, any last words?
Nope.
All right, so there you guys have it. We'll see you guys in the next one. And as always, MIZ.
ZOU.